We're here. We're back. Welcome, Genise.
Hey girl, hey.
So we are so excited to have this conversation, and we're going to give you our snackables. Genise, why don't you tell the folks what a snackable is?
Snackables are snack-sized secrets to executive harmony. They're fast and effective ways to build stronger bonds and boost productivity.
I love it. We know that you have a limited time, and we want to make sure that we pack enough information in a short amount of time so you can walk away inspired, understanding a new concept, and getting your snackable in. So today, what we want to talk about are the complementary roles of the chief of staff and the executive assistant. Why and how we can work together effectively, right?
If you're not working effectively, we're not working.
So let me tell you a little bit of my experience working with an effective executive assistant and how that was a game changer for me. That person became my partner, and that's the only way that I ever referred to them. I always said, let's partner on this. Let's figure out how we're going to do this together. How do we make sure that we're working in alignment? Those are all nice little catchy words, but they actually mean something. If I'm not working in harmony with my admin, the work is harder. Things just fall apart.
Absolutely. When I started working with my chief of staff, my boss was not yet in the role that he's in today, which was running a 30,000 person organization. We were still down in the 2,000 to 3,000 range. And my manager at the time had this perspective that he didn't need a chief of staff. Yeah. And this is where the complementary roles come into play, because he really believed that the EA could do the work that the chief of staff does. I don't need another person here to get in the middle of our stuff. And we had tried it before, but I don't think we landed it properly. But I think what was super important when I had my relationship with the chief of staff was that we got clear about what the expectations were between us. Yep. And didn't go into she stepped on my toes or am I going to step on her toes. It was very clear about you manage these things and I'll manage those things. And we worked really hard to stay in our specific lanes. And I think that's what was important, because not only is it important to not step on each other's toes, but it's also important because then me as the EA feels like you trust me to do my job. And then I can trust you to do yours.
Something that you are talking about, and we're not going to highlight, but it's just something that should be understood, is that line of communication. When I started my last role, there was already an admin in place, and she was the first person I met with when I was hired. And my questions to her were, what are the things that I need to know? What's the best way that we can work together? Let's stay connected. We should meet every week. If we need to meet times, I want to understand how you do your work. And then there's a lot of times where I would have an idea about something and I would say, and I'll use an example. I'd be like, hey, Genise, I want to do this for the leader that I'm supporting. What do you think? What don't I know? And that would have such insights. And I'd be like, thank you for telling me this. I would craft an email and I would send it her way and I'd say, tell me if you think this makes sense. I'm new to the organization. You have the contextual knowledge. We were communicating so much that you would have thought that we were just homies connected at the hip, which is how it should be, actually.
Yes.
All of the time about everything that was going on, and there wasn't a decision that she didn't provide me input into.
You know what? I agree with that. And I think that was the best thing that you could have done, was to meet with her first, because we in our roles are overlooked so frequently, because we're doing everything to keep the train on the track and to keep everything going. And a lot of times people forget to acknowledge our existence, because for some of us it could be like, hey, hello, I'm here. But then for a lot of us, that's also a compliment, that I'm doing such a good job. They stealth. They don't even know that I'm here and everything is running so smooth. So it can feel thankless at times and it can feel overlooked a lot of the times. And so to have someone to come in who's going to work so closely with the leader that I'm supporting and incorporate me and include me in the conversation, include me in helping to make decisions for the business, I think is super important for chief of staffs to do that. I think that you're only going to be stronger when you incorporate and include your EA in the work and the decisions you're making, and even walking them through the why making a certain decision and what you're doing it for, what you're trying to accomplish. Because I've talked to so many admins who have worked with chief of staff, and many years ago at the company, when a chief of staff was not the flex that it is now, especially with the previous leaders that were running all of our bigger product groups. They just to do everything for as lean as possible. And
Right.
so if the admin can play dual roles, they would definitely take advantage of that. But what was happening, and admins were doing things that they really weren't necessarily trained properly to do, and they did it more in-depth knowledge in a lot of these areas that the admins, not a matter of like not having a capacity of being able to learn those things, we didn't have the time, we
Right.
didn't have the space. And particularly at our company, admins that don't necessarily function in the same way as admins at per se or any of these other companies, because we would have to do headcount, we would have to do space planning, we have to do event planning, we have to do inventory management. There were so many different things that we had on our plate. And then to have to do some headcount calculation, projections, like no one has time for that. We had a surface level amount of work that we did to that, but no one could really ever go deep. And so that's where the chief of staff is really instrumental for us to help go deep. You set the plan, you set the guidelines, you set the expectations of where you want the business to go, and the EAs can be there to help support that with their dotted line EAs and admins that work in the business. And it kind of alleviates the pressure off the EAs to try to do everything to everyone.
Right. Everybody, I hope you listened to every last word that Genise just said, because she gave you a sneak peek into some of the stuff we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how we are actual extensions of our leader. And if the EA and the admin are working in lockstep, how that is literally a force multiplier for the organization and that leader. There's so much in what you said. And another thing that you brought up, which I've always done with my EAs, is we'll have a meeting and I'll ask them, did you understand the context behind the discussion that was just had? Did you let me know if you didn't get it? We will have a session together and we're going to deconstruct it. Let me tell you who my biggest cheerleader is. The admin. She is my biggest cheerleader, because I'm like, look, everything that I'm doing, I want you to understand why I'm doing it. I want you to have a voice. And then I want you to feel like you have the executive presence. You don't need my permission, but I want you to feel empowered that you have that presence, that you can speak, because we sit in leadership meetings. And one of the things that one of my admins had told me, she said, I'm uncomfortable when I talk in front of the leaders because I don't feel like I have the knowledge. I don't have the context. And I'd say, well, what do you want to talk about? You and I are on chat. I bet you that whatever you talk about, you're going to be appropriate. And if you want me to give you feedback afterwards, we can talk about what happened afterwards, but let's practice how you show up and tell me what you feel uncomfortable. And we would do that. That's why my admin right now is my biggest cheerleader. If I have somebody who they don't understand, she's like, have you talked to Emery? Did you spend 5 minutes with her? I promise you that she's looking out for the organization. And so for me, that has been so impactful, because I'm like, I can't be successful without her.
Right. No, it's so true. And you had mentioned something around the EA feeling comfortable to speak in front of leaders. And that's that imposter syndrome. That is such a big piece when we sit in space with these powerful leaders who run these large volume organizations. But the fact of the matter is, you're the expert. It comes from your leader down to them. It's really about confidence and understanding that really they don't know what you know, don't have all of the context that you have when it comes to why your leader may go in a certain direction, or why the chief of staff is like, I need you guys to help me do this, and you're there to support the chief of staff in compiling or curating information. So I think we have to get into a place where it's like, I don't care if you have to stand in front of a mirror, no one knows what I know, because everything, all the bodies are buried for the most part. Yeah. And effective admin knows when it's appropriate to say certain things in the room and when it's not appropriate. And when you have those questions about whether or not I'm thinking that we should share these things, this is when your chief of staff, that's your partner in crime.
When I talk to other chiefs, the things that we say is, it's a lonely role. There are things that the chief of staff knows that nobody else knows. There are things that I know that the directs don't know. And if I have a solid communication with my executive assistant, that person is on that lonely journey with me. We're able to look at the organization and take care of it. And I can't express how important it is to have a good relationship, because I've had bad relationships. And it has been trying and challenging. It introduces stress to your leader. I had an experience where I did work with an executive assistant, and she was good, but there were challenges. I'm just going to say there were challenges. And she would escalate some of her challenges to our leader. That's the last thing that leader needs, is to figure out that you two have funk.
No, that's the worst thing you could do.
In a multi-billion-dollar organization, this is petty.
Right. Amory, I didn't always know that when I was supporting my leader about high dollar time.
Yes.
Return on investment. That is something that has been like bang, bang, bang in my head since, I don't know, 2005. But it was so helpful for me to understand, if my leader is spending 10 minutes on something that really I should be solving, that's not a return on investment. That's not a good return on investment. That's a loss, because we don't know how much they make, but we know that they make a lot. And that's
Right.
a lot of high dollar time that should be focused on the vision for the business and for the company. And we have the key and we have the answer. And really, and I always say, don't go to your leader with a problem. Go to them with the problem and 3 solutions that you think that you should go to. And before you take those solutions to your leader, you and your chief of staff should be lockstep and on the same page. This is what we're running into. Tell me your thoughts. What do you need? What do you think? And sometimes you don't even need to go to the leader, because sometimes you can get resolved between you and the chief of staff. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't think about, before I take this to this person, what can I do? What's within my control? And sometimes we have to stop. And if you're sitting there waiting for the leader to have the answer for you, this is me keeping it real. Maybe you should consider something else, because you should not be sitting in that space if you need your leader to have the answer. You need to be working together with your chief of staff to develop the answer, because the truth of the matter is, when that leader is not in place, the chief of staff is that leader.
Well, another thing that's really important, and that we'll probably dissect in another one of our podcasts, is the difference between venting to your leader and then genuine coaching and mentorship. And those are 2 very different things. And there's an opportunity for everyone to get coaching from their leader. And that follows a framework. There's not one. There's a framework around coaching versus, I'm so mad because Genise won't. No. And I agree with you. Like, if you can't make that distinction, it's probably not the role for you as a chief or an executive assistant.
Absolutely.
It's both of them. If as a chief, you cannot handle trying to solve a problem that you might have with the executive, you might want to think twice, because that's the last thing a leader needs to figure out is, these are my 2 most trusted people, the close to me in the organization. And if y'all, and I have to fix this.
It's a problem. I have a question for you, Amory, because something else that many admins that I've mentored, one thing that came in is sometimes the chief of staff comes in and they're either new to the role of chief of staff, or they are insecure for whatever reason. And they could have come from another organization where they didn't have the support of the leader or the admin. And so they come in feeling like they need to be a bull in a china shop. Sure. And what are some good ways that admins can circumvent that and help build trust in those situations?
It's something that you said early on in the conversation. You want to start to establish your roles and responsibilities. Genise, I'm so excited that you're the chief of staff. These are the things that I've been working on. I want to work effectively with you. What are the areas that you want to work on? How do we partner together? Language matters. You're not my assistant. You are my partner. You may have the word assistant in your title, but you're not my assistant. We are on a journey together. We form a trifecta with that leader. And whether that leader looks to me to do these things or that, whatever it is. But that's how I would go into it initially, and to say, hey, this is the stuff that I've been working on. These are the areas that I've seen that there were some gaps. What's the best way for us to fill them together?
Yes.
And what do you want to take on? What do you see for this? And it's always, you try to approach it collaboratively. Now, you said something really important. If you find that you are in a situation where you cannot come up with solutions, you don't want to have to switch your role out. That person may be in a role that maybe they shouldn't be in. We've all situations where we work with people and we're like, how did this happen?
How did that happen? Where did this come from?
And sometimes you're able to turn that around. And in other situations, you can't. And that's why I said it's really important to understand the difference between venting to your leader and coaching. And you better have other mentors and sponsors that are outside that organization. So you can go to them and say, hey, I started working with this new person. These are some of the things that I'm trying. I'm not getting any traction. Can you give me a perspective that I may have missed so I can try something new? And you continue to go down that path. And if you find that it's still not clicking, there may be an opportunity where your leader may want to coach you at that point. Right. And again, right. But you're like, I have done A through Z.
Yes.
Effort. And they won't feel like, what? You can't figure this out on your own?
Right. It's a matter of change your mind, change your life. It's really about how you walk into the situation, how you walk into the situation perceiving what it's going to be. Because I'm on a couple of different sides. I had a chief of staff that came in who we were like buddies before she was a chief of staff. She was one of his program managers on the team who wanted to make this transition and pivot. And we were good friends because we knew each other for so long. So it was like, oh, this is going to be great. And it wasn't. It was not great because because we didn't establish who's on first, who's going to do this and who's going to do that. And I found even me, who I feel like I'm probably one of the most confident people that I know, but I'm really confident in the work that I do. I'm not insecure about where I stand with my leader. So it was a really odd feeling and situation for me to be in, to be with someone. I was like, what is she doing? She's stepping on my toes.
Right.
And I'm usually not one of those people who, I don't care, you make it easier. Hey, knock yourself out. But I didn't feel that way. And I didn't know why. And I like this person.
Yeah.
I like this person. So we just kept bumping heads or stepping over each other. And it became a problem then for the leader.
Right.
Because he has to step in and be like, oh, well, why you do this? Da, da, da. And he didn't like it. It became something that he didn't enjoy. And so we finally had to have a conversation. It's like, I don't think this is it. I don't think this is the role. And it also kind of sealed his perception of like, see, I don't need a chief of staff. This is not going to work for me. This isn't it. Right. But we just didn't have the right person at that time. And then what happened later on is he pulled the chief of staff from one of his directs. He was like, hey, I need to borrow you to do this specific things. And she came and she was so excited, and she and I sat in a meeting for, I don't know, 2 hours. And we were like, I had at the time, I think I had 9 admins reporting to me. So they weren't dotted line. They were literally actually reporting to me. Right. And then she had a group of admins that were reporting to the manager, and we moved them to report to her. So we were partnering in managing these team of admins, trying to figure out what our focus will be, what we want the admins to focus on. And once we did that, we were able to really easily be on the same page, and like, this is how she feels about. She's a little bit more stringent on the operations stuff than I would be, and I was more stringent on the customer care and making sure that the team is supported than she was per se. And so we just found that balance between the two of us and supported each other's important points.
Yep.
And that was how we were able to really maintain such a good connection and a good relationship. And when it came time when our leader got promoted, and she wasn't, now remember, she's not technically his chief of staff yet. He's borrowing her from someone else. Mm-hmm. And I remember when he got promoted and he was like, so I think we're going to have to go hire a chief of staff. And I'm like, what you mean? We already got one. And he was like, well, no. He would think that she'll be able to do it. I was like, dude, I think she's been doing it. I don't understand the question. I really don't understand what you're saying here. I was like, what I'm not going to do is I'm not training. I'm not raising a chief of staff. It's not happening. So we already got her. She's great. I'll go tell her right now that she got the job. He's like, you don't think we should open up a position? No, we got the position. It's right there. She got it.
Let me tell you why I love your story, because there's so many times as women are put in a situation where we're the interim.
Yes.
And we're just the interim.
Yes.
Had you not been looking out for her, she would have been a really good interim that you had for a little while.
Right.
Should have been interim to full-time. Full stop.
That's right.
And I think with this particular instance, because I know this story, which I love this story, I love that it had such a great resolution in very trying times. People are looking very hard for jobs, and people may do things that compromise themselves for a position. Sometimes it's not a happy ending.
Right.
Sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you just can't work with that person. Hopefully those times are less frequent.
Right.
You have to understand that you might be in a situation where it is just not working out with your current situation and the person who you're partnering with. And you may have to make some hard decisions about what your next steps are in order to preserve your peace and your sanity with whatever that role is and whoever you're supporting. So you were able to find harmony and balance so well because you opened up the discussion, you communicated, you talked about roles and responsibilities, and you approached it in a very synergistic fashion. And if we don't do that, you do find yourself in a situation where you're like, I don't know if I can be in this role because it's just too challenging. And I'm to be happy and I am miserable. And even though I'm giving my best, like we have to remember that these times, sometimes they show the good in people and sometimes
show the worst, the absolute worst. You're like, where did this person come from? And I honestly don't understand people, particularly in this role. And I would say that executive assistants is a female dominated role. And I don't know the numbers on chief of staffs, but I find that most of the chief of staffs I've ever encountered, typically 90% of them have been women. And I just am about like, women have to help women. We have enough jerks who are out here who make things difficult for us, who try to create strife in relationships between women. And I think that as leaders, because we're all leaders, I think as leaders, we have to rise above it and be like, what's the goal? Goal is to make our leader look the best that they can look, to make us look the best that we can look, because they could trust that that we're protective and that we have their back and that we're here to make sure that they win, because their win is our win. And if we don't come together as a unit, it's a recipe for disaster. And if you are one of those types that will believe in cutting behind your EA or cutting behind your chief of staff, it's not going to last. It's not going to win. And you may get some promos or whatever, but that stuff doesn't last because people are not rooting for you. And energy is everything. And people do not put good energy behind people who are snakes and who undermine other people and who don't do what's best for not just the executive, but for other people in general. You're never going to win, but you don't. What did Nene Leakes say? You win when you play dirty? That's a real statement. You don't win. You may feel like it, but you're not winning.
Well, and part of our responsibilities, we want to make sure that the organization is thriving. We want to make sure that the leader is in a position where they can move the organization ahead. And if we are complicit in that, our win becomes that leader's wins also.
Right.
We're successful at together, end up benefiting the entire org. And then something that you said earlier about sometimes people miss what the admin is doing because the ship is running smooth. When you have an admin and chief that are in lockstep, you don't even know that they're there. They are taking everything.
Right.
And it's a wonderful thing, but it's a hard thing because, another conversation about how you highlight your outcomes.
Yes.
It works. Do you know what it takes to make sure that everything works?
Yes. And Yes, I can't wait. I know we had a great conversation around this and talking about how to work effectively. I'd love to hear from the audience about the good and the bad. What are some examples of great collaboration that you can share? Or if you've been having a challenge, what are some challenges that you're coming across that we can give you some insight as to how you can get past it or get over it? And like I said, I don't know how to do anything but be real. So I'm going to always be real. You may not always like my answer, but just know that my answer is going to always be rooted in truth and ensuring that you are set up for the best possible position for yourself, because I don't benefit from your loss. I don't benefit from anyone's loss, and I don't benefit even from your win necessarily. However, I want to see people win, and that is just the true nature of what I am as an EA to the core. I haven't been an EA for a long time, but you know what? I can't get away from it. It just I have the EAs call me all the time, still to this day. My manager, who knows good and darn well I'm not a freaking EA anymore, still goes, "Hey, I need your advice. What do you think about this?" We're thinking like, how can I get away? But I can't, because I think it's just is something that has just been born in me. And when I think about it, Anne-Marie, I've been doing, wasn't an EA from a young age, but I've been in this type of role since literally, I'm not kidding you, since I was 9, because my mother ran a diversity office back when I was a kid. And while all my friends get to play outside for the summer and go hang out, I had to go to work with my mom. And so that's where I had how to work on a computer. I learned how to type. I learned everything in this space, and watching my mom as a director, and then watching the other counselors that worked with her and the roles that they did, innately just have always did in roles that are very similar to what I've been doing. So I think it's just innate.
What a beautiful example for you to have in your mom. That's wonderful for that to be the image of success for you, and that you held on to it and you just pushed through that. For me, it's interesting. The older I get, I tell my friends, the older I get, the spicier I get. The less I want to put up with, and I truth a lot more, but I also want to have peace. I want to find that I'm doing right by you, Genise, who's my friend and partner in crime. I'm doing right by the people who are the most important to me. And those who are ancillary to my life, you stay on the borders. You don't influence how I feel, what's going on for me. And so there is this thing for me that I just want to have peace of mind, that when I go to sleep at night, I can go to sleep at night and I'm not tossing and turning because I'm not a snake. I don't want to deal with being authentic. I don't want to deal with people who need me for a soundbite, or can you just show up here so everybody can see that you're my friend? You know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
When I go to bed at night, I want to sleep well, knowing that I have done the best that I can. I remember as a child always being told, you leave the world better than you found it.
Yes, that's so true.
On this planet, who are just trying to mess things up, and I'm being very polite by saying trying to mess things up. I want to leave it better than I found it. I have 4 beautiful nieces. I want them to have all the opportunities that I have and then some. I want to be able to be like, you know what, I wasn't able to do that, but I'm glad that you can do that times 10.
Times 10, times affinity. And yes, leaving that legacy for the people behind us, our kids, our nieces, our family members, the people who look up to us. And I think we're so happy to be able to come together, you and I, and talk about these things and be able to share our own insights and our own experiences. And here's the crazy thing. We've never worked together as EA and Chief of Staff. However, the bond was there from the moment we met each other.
Genise knows you have been one of the most important contacts for me, that I value you, like I said, as a friend, as a partner. I could not be successful in half the things that I was able to be successful in without just talking to you about some of that stuff. So don't get it twisted. Because we didn't work together, I have definitely benefited from having you be a part of my circle, my board of directors.
Oh, Thank you. I feel the same. It's no joke. And I just feel that we have so much that we could share with this audience. And I'm super excited about what we have coming down the pike, what we have to contribute from our own experiences. And we're just here to make the life of the chief of staff and the assistant better and effective. And so this is part of our snack size secrets to executive harmony, and we are super encouraged and excited to hear from you. So don't forget to comment and give us your take, and also let us know what you want to hear and what you want us to discuss, so that we can touch on those things throughout this time. And we are just so super excited to be here with you and to have you take this time out of your day. And we promise this would be a snack size secret. So we're going to keep to our promise, and please join us for our next podcast when coming up, and we'll talk a little bit more about the things that we have going on in the chief of staff and executive EA space. So we look forward to it. And I forgot one plug that we have to put in here, Miss Anne-Marie, your book.
My book? Where is my book? Oh, let me go grab my book.
Yes, your book.
I know.
You spent all that time writing this wonderful book.
It's called The Chief of Staff. It's kind of funny. I didn't think that I would ever write a book. And I had a sponsor who just challenged me and says, well, why don't you put it on paper? And so I wrote this book last year, and it is a great read for folks who want to understand the Chief of Staff world, want to get involved in the Chief of Staff world, and just want to polish off their skills. Now, this is my first book. I have another one that'll be coming out about the Chief of Staff.
Oh.
I write a trilogy. The next book is about outcomes and impacts. And so if you haven't connected with either me or Genise, connect with me on LinkedIn so you can find out what's going on in the book, but connect with both of us on LinkedIn just so you know what's going on in our world, because there's so much information that we want to share with everybody. But that's where you're going to get the latest information about my next book that's coming up. And I have a website, Anne-Marie Otanez.
We'll link to it on the YouTube. We'll have a link to Anne-Marie's site. We'll also have a link to her YouTube site as well for you to subscribe and follow. And then we also will link to our site for Chief and Assist, so that you can find ways to connect with us and learn a little bit more about who we are. And again, let us know what you want to hear. Let us know what is important to you, and we will find ways to address those things. So thank you. And Anne-Marie, it's been real per usual.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for taking this time to have this discussion, and we look forward to seeing you all again. Bye, everyone.